Good morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners agenda setting work session for Tuesday, August 31st, 2021. It's 9:05 a.m. My name is Ty Menser, Chair of the Board, Commissioner for District 3, Vice Chair, Commissioner Gary Edwards is present in the boardroom, as well as our County Manager, Amiro Chavez. We have a whole host of staff that will be presenting items on a long agenda this morning. The public may follow along on our YouTube channel where the meeting is live streamed on Thurston County YouTube. And we're here until probably about noon with a break at some point about halfway through. So let's go to our first item, COVID-19 update. I see Dr. Abdul Malik. Dr. A, are you taking the lead this morning?
Yes. Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. We are on day 573 of our emergency response to the COVID-19 pandemic here in Thurston County. To date, there have been 14,733 COVID-19 cases in Thurston County since the pandemic began. And in terms of Thurston County residents, we've had total deaths of 120, and 881 Thurston County residents have been hospitalized to date. We are currently in the middle of the fifth wave of the Delta variant. So in the last 7 days, 723 Thurston County residents have tested positive for COVID-19. Our average at that time, when we ended collection, was a test positivity rate of 11.4%. 5 people were hospitalized in those 7 days, and 7 people were reported as having died of COVID-19 in those 7 days as well. Our case rate per 100,000, and so the reporting for this from the governor's office and DOH is changing. As of 8/26, it was 489 cases per 100,000 over the past 14 days here in Thurston. We do continue to have a backlog of negative cases, so we're following our test positivity rate closely. As those negative cases are processed, that test positivity rate may be decreased. So 94, in terms of our Western region hospitalization statistics, 94.1% of our adult staffed acute beds are occupied, and 20.8% of those are related to COVID-19. In terms of our COVID-19 ICU beds occupied by suspected COVID-19 cases, we're looking at about 53.7%. We do continue to make progress in terms of vaccination for COVID-19 here in Thurston. So to date, 316,646 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine have been given in Thurston County, with 57.2% of Thurston County residents having initiated vaccination. Of the population that is eligible for vaccine, 60.6% have completed a vaccination series. With the increase in COVID case rates and transmission rates in our county, we have seen an increase in outbreaks. Thurston County Public Health and Social Services is currently monitoring or investigating 12 outbreaks in the county, and there have been 76 total outbreaks to date. And with that, I'm open to any questions you may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thought I saw Commissioner Mejia on the...
She's here.
I saw her. And there she is. Okay. Any questions, Commissioner? You might not have heard all of that, but...
I have questions in regards to, one second, to the booster shot. Last week I asked in regards to, kind of the phases. I know that we are getting the people with high immunity, do we know any more information on that? I know information is being released on the weekly in regards to those issues.
Yeah, so ACIP is meeting, so yesterday and today, so that's the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. I am not sure what the outcome of that meeting is going to be with regard to operationalizing the guidance that was initially released by the Biden administration and supported by our scientific institutions regarding the timing of booster doses. What we suspect is that if it is what we expect, which is booster doses having to that are related to the time lapse between completing a series and needing a booster, we anticipate that the first groups to be vaccinated would mirror the first groups to be vaccinated when we started vaccination. So thinking about healthcare workers, and people living in long-term care and at highest risk. But right now it's too early. It's too early to tell. That's what we're anticipating, but we'll need to get some operational guidance both from ACIP as well as our colleagues at the State Department of Health.
Thank you. And one more question. It's in regards to, I guess, the demand of vaccines, especially the Pfizer, which has been FDA approved. Has there been a specific demand, in Thurston County across Washington State for the Pfizer vaccine that has been FDA approved?
So we have seen increased numbers of folks seeking vaccination. And we've seen, so in the past week, Thurston County Public Health and Social Services has administered 615 doses of COVID-19 vaccine, which is significantly higher than where we were several weeks ago. We're not necessarily seeing increased demand for Pfizer specifically. We do offer Pfizer, J&J, and some Moderna. But we're thinking that at this point, it's likely a confluence of events. So the FDA approval, as well as several vaccine mandates that are in effect.
Great, thank you so much.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, Doctor, the numbers have changed on the deaths. Can you explain that a little bit? It seems to me they were higher a couple of weeks ago. Do you know anything about that? I just wonder if this number is right, the 120.
So there's always a little bit of lag time with deaths because there's a period of reconciliation where first, so deaths get reported and then we wait for the actual death certificate and we confirm, we confirm the certificate, we confirm that the person who died is a Thurston County resident, and we confirm that one of the causes of death listed is COVID-19. So that's often, so when there's a little bit of a lag, that's usually where it is in terms of our process.
Oh, okay, thank you. Of those that have died, would you say the vast majority of those folks have underlying conditions?
So yes. So where that information has been reported, and it's not always reported, 100% of the people who've died have had an underlying condition in Thurston County based on our data.
Is there several conditions maybe that are more prevalent than anything else that people could focus on in their wellness strategy, that it would be better for them to do X than Y? I don't really know. I'm just wondering, because I think wellness is a big piece of the outcome here.
So I agree that wellness is important in terms of what we're learning. So we're learning about the increased risk of infection and disease severity in folks that have suppressed immune systems, and that's why the third dose of the vaccine has been released. We know that COVID-19 has broad impacts A lot of the COVID-19 pneumonia can be very severe. So thinking about things that folks might have, like underlying lung problems, would increase risk in that regard. It can, any sort of viral infectious illness can have adverse impacts on people with heart problems or kidney problems, among others. So I know the CDC is tracking this pretty closely. But in terms of people, in terms of what folks should be doing, a lot of it is, in addition to the prevention measures of masking, distancing, getting vaccinated when eligible, and avoiding large gatherings, a lot of it really is the same wellness guidance that is true all the time. So, thinking about a diverse, a diet rich in unprocessed foods where possible, fruits and vegetables, exercise, stress reduction. This is a very stressful time, and then in physical activity, in addition to the COVID-19 specific recommendations and guidance that's available.
Oh, okay, thank you. We hear a lot about the Delta variant. How do we know that we're in the middle of that type of a variant that is, causing this problem? Do we have a test that actually shows, and are each one of our people that are being admitted, are they being tested so we know the difference between the old variant or the new? I guess that's the best way I can put it from a layman's perspective, the old variant versus the new Delta variant.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So a certain number of, so the state does random sampling of COVID-19 tests and sequences them, and that's how we know what the prevalence is of different variants. For the last several weeks, well over 90% of the tests taken from folks who've been infected in Washington state have been the Delta variant when sequenced. So it's a safe assumption that almost every test is likely to be the Delta variant. Just the prevalence is so high.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. That's it for me, Chair.
Okay, thanks, sir. Dr. I only have one question. This morning, couple 3 weeks ago when Delta was rising fast, again, TV doctors or whatever, I can't remember where I got the information, but they were basically projecting that, the modeling would show that this wave would peak in like mid-September-ish, and maybe by late September start to, decline, just based on the way the previous waves have gone. This one kind of moving faster because it's so much more contagious. But I guess I'm just wondering, have you heard something like that? Is that kind of what we should expect? Ideally we make a dent in that by our actions, and our being careful, but it seems like, with something this powerful, it kind of follows this pattern. I was just wondering if you could back that up, or is that just, in a sense that's a long time, but at least it's like a glimmer. It's like a glimmer of like, how long can this, can these really high numbers keep going, I guess is what I'm trying to think about.
So there've been a number of projections. I'm always a little hesitant to prognosticate at this point because there's so many unknowns. A lot of them are based on the experience in India where the Delta variant was first identified, and the experience in the UK, which are situations that are significantly different from ours. I am watching our weekly case counts closely. We had over 700 cases for 2 weeks. Last week we were at 676, and then this past week we're at 723 cases in Thurston County residents diagnosed in the preceding 7 days. some of this, we're working on making sure that folks have access to testing so that our numbers are accurate. But right now, in terms of the diagnosed cases, we're seeing a little bit of a plateau, but things could still change, and we're watching closely.
County Manager, anything for Dr. A?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Doctor. I think you addressed this in relation to the 7 deaths in the last 7 days. Those are not necessarily the deaths in the last 7 days. It's when we got reports, because those deaths could have occurred maybe a couple of weeks back, right? I just want to make sure that, I know you addressed that, but I want to make sure that it is clear, because it's a lag on the death certificates, and we just happened to receive 7 death certificates associated with COVID this last 7 days.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. A.
Thank you.
Let's move to item 2, which is homeless strategies update. And Keely Marino is back.
I'm back.
Welcome back,
Good
Keely.
morning. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Keely Marino with Public Health and Social Services. Just a few updates for you today. In terms of our rental assistance, I'd like to keep you updated on that. To this point, Community Youth Services has spent over $200,000 on rental assistance, serving over 65 households of youth and young adults between the ages of 18 and 24 living in Thurston County, and there's another 124 in process. And then for Community Action Council, for those not between the ages of 18 and 24, they've spent over about $12 million so far of the rental assistance dollars, serving 1,709 households. 57% of which of those households are at or below 30% area median income. So moving right along with that. And then otherwise, today is the Overdose Awareness Day, which does impact our houseless community as well as our house community, but we have several events that will be occurring throughout the county. Our opioid response coordinator, Katie Strozik, is hosting an event at Percival Landing today in downtown Olympia at 12 p.m. There'll be Narcan training and other outreach activities and several other activities scattered throughout Thurston County to commemorate this day. Barbecues, safely distanced and masked and outside, and other activities for individuals to participate in. So just wanted to draw some attention to that, as it is a very important day for us to be thinking about and remembering those that we may have lost in the last year to the opioid crisis. And that is my update.
Thank you, Keely. This button here is about opioid awareness. You can't see it on the screen, but that's what it's for.
Thank you.
We had a naloxone training for staff yesterday, so that was good. Commissioner Mejia, anything for Keely?
No, sir.
Commissioner Edwards?
No, sir.
Another event happening today, because next week's meeting is canceled, board meeting is canceled, but although there's agenda setting, but tonight there is a award ceremony being Chamber sponsors it and is awarding it, but they're honoring healthcare champions in the community, and our very own Keely Marino is going to be a recipient one of those awards. So I'll learn more about what it's all about tonight because I'm going to be there, but we definitely appreciate her and congratulate her on that award.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Woohoo, Keely! I
Thank
do have a question, sir, if I may.
Go ahead, Ramiro.
Hey, Keely, I know the Community Action Council on their website stopped receiving applications for rental assistance. Has that been resolved?
Yes, indeed, it has been resolved. As of yesterday, the scheduler was opened up again.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Okay, thank you. Good.
Thank you.
See you this evening.
I think Robin wanted to.
Oh, Robin, did you have something for Keely? You got to wave that hand.
Oh, no, I had just turned on the video to applaud her acknowledgement. So great job. And we're so fortunate to have you, Keely.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, Next on the agenda is reviewing this afternoon's board meeting agenda. The meeting will be called to order at 2 p.m. With Pledge of Allegiance to be led by Vice Chair Edwards, consideration of the agenda and board meeting minutes from last week, and a series of presentations today. The first one is a Washington State Auditor of the Year Award. And Kim Wyman, the Washington Secretary of State, is this accurate, Ramiro?
Yes,
Will-
yes, sir.
I'll let you go ahead and describe this then.
Yeah, the Washington State Secretary of State, Ms. Kim Wyman, will be coming, I believe in person, to present our county auditor, Mary Hall, with the Washington State Auditor of the Year Award. That's a well-deserved accolade there. Mary Hall has worked hard to get to where we are. She's a champion, I believe, across the state and perhaps the nation as to how she believes the elections are pivotal to our democracy. So also, I believe Mary Hall will be in person this afternoon. We're going to try to manage that a little bit differently. So this will be a great opportunity for you to say thank you also for Ms. Kim Wyman.
Anything on that item from the commissioners?
No, sir.
No, probably well-deserved.
When we had our hand recount in Yelm, I was teasing Mary because she had such an utmost sense of confidence that the count would come out exactly the same, and lo and behold, it did. So hopefully that gives people a lot of confidence in our local election system here in Thurston County, thanks to Mary, among others. Next will be Public Works. And this is a notice of US DOT Act Section 4F de minimis.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Last week I presented the item and with the help of Public Works staff. This is a little bit of a unique item. And I think every week we learn something about the county business. Public Works is in the process of constructing an intersection improvements on Hawkesbury Road and the intersection with Johnson Point. As a result of those improvements, there is a need to take just about 440 additional square feet from the Woodland Creek Wetland Preserve. The Woodland Creek Wetland Preserve is owned and managed by Thurston County. However, this particular preserve is protected by federal and state laws. So the 450 feet is considered to be de minimis. We fixed that spelling, by the way, out of the 68 acres that we have on this preserve. So this particular presentation this afternoon is an official notice of intent. And that is a requirement by federal and state law. The county needs to make the notice of intent public, and the Board of County Commissioners serves that purpose. And after that is completed, we go through the process of taking the 440 square feet out of the 60 acres of the Woodland Creek Wetland Preserve. And I believe Elena Fernandez is here if she wants to add anything else.
Anything for us, Elena? I know we talked about this last week.
No, Commissioner, Ramiro definitely kind of summarized everything pretty well, so.
Questions, Commissioner Mejia?
No, sir.
Commissioner Edwards?
No, sir.
Okay, good to go. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you.
Our third item under presentations is Emergency Services Proclamation for National Preparedness Month, and there's Kurt Harden.
Yeah, Kirk Harden, our Director of Emergency Services, will be presenting to the board for your consideration to pass a proclamation declaring the month of September 2021 as the National Preparedness Month in Thurston County. Kurt, you want to share additional details on this, or let's just wait until this afternoon?
Anything, Kurt, we need to know?
Yep. Good morning, Commissioners. Kurt Harden, Director of Emergency Services. I decided to select as my background the flood waters as we get prepared for floods in the fall here. The County Manager summarized it fairly well. We'll also talk a little bit this afternoon about our weekly themes. And also the 2021 National Preparedness Month theme, which is Prepared to Protect, preparing for disasters is protecting everyone you love. So I'll go a little more into detail this afternoon about the weekly themes and some of the schedule of events that we have, and some of the activities that we have on Zoom, since we still are conducting Zoom for everyone in the community.
Commissioners, anything for Kurt?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Kurt. See you this afternoon. Opportunity for the public to address the board and county manager's update. Any items there, Ramiro?
I just have one item. You received public testimony last week related to masking requirements by the governor. There seems to be a little bit of a confusion, so I'm planning to walk through the actual order this afternoon just to clarify some of the comments you received last week.
Okay. If there's no other questions there, let's go to the consent items. We have 3A through 3E. 3A is a treasure item. Actually, 3A, B, and C are tax title items. And let's go with 3A, and there's Jeff Gadman, our county treasurer. Good morning.
Good morning, Jeff. Item 3A is related to a tax title property, which is just about a 5-foot strip, which is considered to be unpractical to build. This was a tax title exempt status since 1976. As we go through the process, we have to go through a foreclosure action, and there was no bidders related to the foreclosure action. You know, the RCW 3635-120 and related RCWs allows the county, in this case the treasurer's office, to engage on a private negotiation to sell this property. So this is the property that was presented to you, and it's just about 0.02 acres. And the price overall is $513.50. So I believe you discussed this item. I don't recall having any specific questions on item 3A. So, but Jeff is here, I believe, to answer any additional questions you may have.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you, commissioners. Jeff Gadman, County Treasurer. On this particular property, it's a 5-foot strip. Kind of got forgotten about at some point. I don't know if it's part of an old right-of-way or whatever, but the person who is interested in buying this thinks it's already been incorporated into her yard by a prior owner of the property, and she just wants to basically quiet title so that there's no hassle if she decides to sell.
Commissioner Mejia?
No questions.
Commissioner Edwards?
No, sir.
Okay, good on that one. Let's go to 3B.
Item 3B and 3C are similar because they're adjacent to each other. It is located within the Carlon Beach area. And the two items 3B and 3C, again, they don't have access. Although on the plat, on the map that I presented to the board last week, it appears to be an access road, but perhaps it was there at one point, but it's no longer available to access those properties. And those properties are scheduled. One is about 0.32 acres, and the other one is a little bit smaller than that. And the proposed asking negotiated price to sell this is just about $1,400, including all the fees. The board engaged on a conversation last week on those two particular properties, and I believe Commissioner Edwards was going to reach out to the homeowners association to see if they have any perhaps heartburn related to this particular surplus of this property. So I think that's what I got based on my notes. Is that correct, Commissioner?
Yes, sir, and I did, and there is no concern whatsoever, and I want to compliment our treasurer, Jeff Gadman, for getting rid of these properties and putting them back on the tax rolls. No problem at all. They're good with it, and thank you, Jeff, for another good job.
Thank you. Trying to get these to be productive for us if I can.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff. That'll be 3A, B, and C, and then we'll have 3D as a Sheriff's Department item, request for proposals for inmate chemical dependency program services.
Yeah, you also reviewed this item last week, Commissioners, and the Sheriff's Office currently have a vendor that provide inmate chemical dependency services and the Thurston County Corrections Facility. This particular contract expires on December 31st, 2021. The Sheriff's Office has been proactive in making sure there is not a lag time when this particular contract expires, and is requesting for you to authorize the Sheriff's Office to work with the request for proposals to request vendors that will continue to provide the chemical dependency services and the corrections facilities. At some point, the result of the request for proposals will be selecting a new contractor, and that will be, I believe, the next step for the Sheriff's Office, if you approve this item, to go ahead and sign with a winning vendor in a way. Under Sheriff Brady's here, if you have any questions.
Questions for Under Sheriff Brady, Commissioner Mejia?
Yes, just for some clarification for the public. What kind of services, does the chemical dependency services offer to the inmates?
So they use MRT, which is moral recognition therapy, is what they do in the chemical dependency program. I've been advised this is the same program that our drug court uses as well. So they like that approach, and they want to keep that style so that we're being consistent across the different county organizations.
Thank you.
Commissioner Edwards?
No, sir.
No, me neither. Thank you, Under Sheriff Brady. That will take care of 3D. And then 3E, are there any questions from the board on outer voucher list items, warrant request?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Nope, okay. Then item 4A, Central Services, request for qualifications for courthouse facilities project development study.
Yeah, this is a new item, Commissioners, that I gave you a heads up last week that we will be bringing this for your consideration. This particular item is for you to authorize the request for qualifications for an architectural and engineering firm to start working on the elements of the courthouse campus. So the courthouse campus was built in 1978. Many building systems are reaching the end of the lifespan. Major facility deficiencies are presently being experienced and expected to get worse. And so the board has discussed this particular approach in terms of, in association with the 3000 Pacific Avenue and the potential move to some of the offices and departments to this leased facility. That decision is going to come hopefully in the next couple of weeks for you to exercise your vote on that. But in either case, whether the 3000 Pacific becomes a real project to move forward or not, there still need to be an assessment as to what we need to do here at the courthouse campus. And in this particular proposal is for the county to request qualifications again from an architectural and engineering firm to start determining what is it that we need here at the courthouse campus to start addressing the needs. It could be space, but it could be just replacing the aging infrastructure that we have in place. So that is the for your consideration, and the next step will be after the selection process to come back and for you to consider awarding the contract to the selected firm. Robin, you like to add anything else? Oh, Chris Elmer's here, our project manager.
Right, I don't have anything to add. Chris, how about you?
No, I think Romero covered it. If there's any technical questions related to it, I can certainly respond to those when they come up.
Commissioner Mejia?
I have a question in regards to, part of the qualifications that we're looking for is someone who's experienced with courtrooms.
That is correct.
That is correct.
Okay.
We make sure that scope of work is specific to that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, do we have a projected time that we might come up with a recommendation from a bidder that is selected? Do you have any time
So
frame at all on this?
We do. So we assume the performance period for this particular study will be 4 to 6 months. Obviously, it hinges on whether 3000 Pacific moves forward. So that is the performance period estimation at this point.
I guess my concern on that is, do we get ahead of ourselves, both with complications from the virus and potential complications if we do or don't go down to the 3000 building? So I'm wondering about the timing here. If the timing is appropriate, that's what I'm trying to figure. So it sounds like the county manager's got an
Yeah,
answer.
I can address that, Commissioner. So if the board approves this particular request for proposals, there is going to be a time in which there's going to be advertising this proposal. So the firms can apply for that proposal. I'm expecting, and I'm going to work with Rob in the next 2 weeks. We will bring all that information related to the 3000 Pacific in front of the board for you to make a decision. So, and at that time, it will be a go or no go on the 3000 Pacific. And depending on the decision of the board, then the request for proposals and the schedule for this particular item will be put in place.
And at that point in time, might we have some budgetary idea of what it's all going to be about?
Well, really, that is the intent, is to give us a sense as to how much it's going to cost of the many different projects that we need here at the courthouse.
Okay, so.
Yeah, because at this point, we don't know, so we need a consultant to guide us through that process.
Okay. Okay, that's it. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, Chris. Let's go to item 5A, set a public hearing for Tumwater Joint Plan update.
Yeah, you reviewed this item last week, and for your consideration is to set the public hearing for the Tumwater Joint Plan. And that this public hearing for your consideration is to set it for September 28, 2021 at 3 in the afternoon in this room. You had a couple of briefings related to this particular matter, and in fact, the last briefing was combined with City of Tumwater staff. And also the Planning Commission has gone through the process in reviewing this item in many public meetings. So with your concurrence, we'll set the public hearing. You will be receiving public testimony on the proposed amendments. And at that point, depending on the public testimony, you will be in the position to either change some of the recommendations or just approve as presented to you. Maya?
Thank you. Maya Teeple, Senior Planner with Community Planning. I don't have much to add, but I do want to clarify that the draft that will go forward to the public hearing will have both recommendations that were produced by the City of Tumwater Planning Commission and the Thurston County Planning Commission. So the board will have flexibility in that decision after the public hearing.
Questions from the board?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you, Maya. Good to go there. Let's look at 6A, Public Health and Social Services, request for proposals for Developmental Disabilities Department Community Project Grants.
Yeah, for your consideration, Commissioner, is for you to authorize the issuance of requests for proposals for services programs and community outreach to enhance and increase services in the community to support the health and well-being of individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. This particular request for proposals provides just about $600,000 from Thurston County, the millage fund. We had a conversation what the millage fund is. It's part of the property tax, as well as also funds from the Thurston, from Mason County millage fund, which is just about $200,000. And also we have complementary state grants that will help us to deliver the services to that part of our community. And this particular proposal is for a performance period of 2 years from January 1st, 2022 through December 31st, 2022. That's 1 year, but have an option to extend that for another year. Annalise Cole is here from Public Health and Social Services. If you have any questions related to this item.
Commissioner Mejia?
No questions in regards to this, thank you.
Commissioner Edwards?
No, sir.
Nope, good to go.
Thank you.
Let's look at item 7A, Public Works. Ordinance restricting compression brakes on Little Rock Road Southwest.
Yeah, Commissioners, you held a public hearing back in July 2021, where you received public testimony related to proposals to impose restrictions on compression brakes on two roadways. The proposal for you was again two roadways, and the board they provided direction that based on your perspective, they would like to impose the compression brake restrictions only on one location. That is the Little Rock Road Southeast between Albany Street and Sargent Road. And this particular item is to follow up the direction of the board imposing the compression brake restrictions on this road. Any questions?
Commissioners, anything here?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. We've been through that one long enough. Let's go to 7B. Request for a proposal for a solid waste, moderate risk waste transportation and disposition management services contract.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. We introduced this item last week, and as you may recall, we have a facility called the Hassel House at the Waste and Recovery Center, which is located in the Hawkesbury area, where we receive hazardous waste from household items. And as we receive those chemicals, we need to operate it and as well as dispose of that. And the contractor who has provided those services has been in place for some years. And Jeff, on his new leadership, Brickford, has determined that perhaps a good idea to go ahead with that request for proposals to secure the services of new contracts. It's always good to go ahead and refresh those contracts, and this is the proposal for you to consider doing that. Just to give a perspective, annually, approximately 25,000 customers use this facility, which they drop just about 100 tons of waste. And so this is a very good service to the community at no cost, if I may say, to all the citizens. So if you have any additional questions, I see Jeff on the screen. And
Good morning, Commissioners. I think Ramiro covered that pretty well. I'm willing to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Commissioner Mejia?
No, sir.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes. Is that also the collection, transportation, and distribution?
disposal.
Or disposal?
Well, actually, the customers bring the materials to us, so and that's county staff.
At that location?
Correct.
And this has been a contract with an outfit apparently that we're utilizing now. And we've been utilizing that for quite some period of time, I think, the same outfit.
That is correct.
Any problems at all that we're trying to address with the new contract?
Not really, no. Okay. But it's just it's time to get out a new proposal, get new costing.
And the county manager commented at no cost to the citizens, but somehow there's a cost, right?
So for the citizens who bring those chemicals to the Hassel House, we don't charge for that.
Right.
Obviously, on the back end, is funded by the tipping fees. And
so out of that total tipping fee is where the payment comes.
Right.
And I might just add that when small businesses bring their materials in, their hazardous waste, they do pay a fee. It's the citizens, when they come, it is at no cost to citizens.
Okay. And really what we're doing is protecting the environment in the end, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And our employees as well, because when some of these hazardous wastes get thrown in the garbage, they can mix in the backs of garbage trucks or in the transfer station, and potentially, besides the environment, health is potentially impacted as well. So it's protecting our employees and the environment.
Are all the employees that are involved with Hazard House, are they subcontractors or are they county employees?
We have 3 employees that staff that facility, and they are all 3 Thurston County employees, correct?
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Good to go.
Thank you.
Let's look at Public Works item 7C, setting a public hearing for the 6-year transportation improvement program for 2022 to 2027.
Thank you, Commissioners. You received a briefing on July 21st, 2021, where the county engineer presented the transportation improvement program for the years of 2022 through 2027. And the RCW 3681-121 is very prescriptive as to what the county engineer needs to present the board, which he did. Now, the next step in the process is for you to consider setting a public hearing where you will receive public testimony related to the transportation improvement program. This particular item is to set the public hearing for September 28, 2021. And I believe we're considering having a later date on this, or?
Yeah, the direction of the board, if we'd like to.
So since we have 2 public hearings on that day, there's an option to have this public hearing in October. And then we don't have 2 competing public hearings on September 28th. That is up to the pleasure of the board on that. But Scott Lindblom, our county engineer, is here.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. I believe the county manager summarized the issue quite well, and we can certainly, if there is a conflict in public hearings, at the desire of the board, we can change our public hearing date if you'd so choose. And you were a little bit garbled up there at the last bit, so I didn't quite catch what you said there at the end.
It will be for a week later.
Excellent.
So,
Yeah, if that's the will of the board, we can certainly do that.
Because I believe there is not a pressing issue that we need to hold this public hearing on September 20th.
That is correct. We could certainly postpone it a week if need be.
Okay, I don't know that, I mean, we often have 2 public hearings on the same day. I'm not guessing that either one's going to be a massive outpouring of residents coming to testify, but maybe I'm wrong. Commissioner Mejia, anything on this?
No, I have the same. We often have 2 public hearings one day, so.
I guess I have a question. Is the concern that we're going to have more than 2 public hearings? We've already got 2 set for that day, and we might have 3 if we put it on today.
No, the other public hearing that you may be considering setting up is the Town Water Joint Plan update, where you might receive testimony on that. That's the only item, at least that I have, and that's what I'm giving the board the option.
And so that's the only other public hearing we're going to have?
Yeah.
I don't mind doubling up myself.
Let's just keep it as proposed then. It sounds like the board's fine with having those 2.
Unless we get wind that, we're gonna be here until 7 o'clock that night because of public testimony.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so we'll keep it as a state.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I've sat through, 4 or 5 of these now, and generally, we don't have anybody show up or even make comment on. Because this will be for 23 or 22 to 27, then we'll do one next year for 23 to 28. The year after that for 24 to 29, I guess, right? That's the way, the progression of it. So I've never experienced that it's been a problem. I'll just point that out. Longevity, I guess, has its benefits.
Okay, then we'll just set this on for September 28th. Thank you, Scott.
Great, thank you.
Let's go to Sheriff's Department item 8A, resolution for body scanner with thermal scanner.
Yeah, Commissioners, you authorized the expenditure during your budget amendment process in 2021, where you authorized the Sheriff's Office to purchase a body scanner that is going to be helping with the admission of inmates in the general public in the Thurston County jail. So this particular request is for you to authorize the Sheriff's Office to go ahead and purchase this scanner, the thermal scanner through the United States General Services Administration. And this is a allowable approach without going through a formal bidding process. And I believe the total cost is $204,120 just for the equipment. There might be additional costs associated with the installation of the equipment. Again, Under Sheriff Brady is here. If you have any additional questions.
Commissioner Mejia?
Just out of curiosity, I mean, well, first, I guess I'll make the comment that this was covered by COVID funds, correct?
ARP funds.
ARP funds, okay. And then to operate like a body scanner, like, does it need special training requirements? I'm just, more curiosity than anything.
Yeah, so my understanding is there is a little bit of training that the company will do and provide, but it's very limited. So this type of scanner is very, very similar to that I'm sure most of us have been through at our airports. And so there is a little bit of training that goes along with it. And then also part of that is just the ability to be able to decipher what you're viewing on there.
So this is the one you put your hands up at the airport, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Edwards?
No, sir.
Okay, I'm good as well. So let's move to item 9A, Superior Court. 2021-22 Superior Court Treatment Services Contract.
Yeah, you also reviewed this item last week, Commissioners. And for your consideration is to award the contract to Pierce County Alliance Treatment Services to provide treatment services in the Superior Court business, which includes provide substance use disorder, mental health treatment services to participants in the DUI, drug court, and family recovery court center programs. This was the result of a request for proposals that was conducted in July 2021. In this particular contract, if you agree to award to Pierce County Alliance Treatment Services, will go from August 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022 for a cost of $58,942. And this particular cost will be covered by the Criminal Justice Treatment Account, also known as the CJTA. Any questions? I don't think we have Superior Court representatives here, but I'll be more than happy to answer the questions if I can.
In the waiting room?
No.
Commissioners, any questions on this item? I know we've reviewed it a couple times.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, good. Then we'll go to county manager category, which is standing items for the commissioners to give reports and county manager to view our schedule. And that will be that for this afternoon's board meeting. Bringing us to item 4 on the morning's work session agenda, which is just making note for the public that next Tuesday's board meeting will not occur. The holiday Monday, Labor Day, courthouse will be canceled, and then we'll have agenda setting in the morning, but we'll not have the formal board meeting on the Tuesday afternoon. So with that, we're at item 5, proclamations and awards.
Good morning, Amy Davis, Clerk of the Board. The proclamation for National Preparedness Month is included along with the upcoming September proclamations for Day of Service and Remembrance, National Hispanic and Latino Heritage Month, and last year's Voter Registration Day proclamation as a placeholder. I'd also like to share with you that we've received a request to present a proclamation for the 130th anniversary of the Olympia Elks Lodge. And I'm sure you're familiar, but the Elks Lodge is a fraternal order that provides educational and patriotic community-minded programs. If there is consensus to include this proclamation on the schedule, I will include it for early October, and we'll do some shuffling around of the others for the month.
I missed, what was the group?
The Olympia Elks Lodge. Mm-hmm.
Is there a prepared draft for that resolution?
If there's consensus to include it, we'll draft a proclamation with the Elks Lodge, and they've provided a template that they're using with other municipalities, so we'll work off of that with them.
Okay, Commissioner Mejia.
I would like to hear from the two senior members about this.
Is this 100-year?
130.
130, yeah.
And are we going to promote the betterment of the community that they might involve themselves in? Is that going to be the basis for this?
Yeah, to recognize their accomplishments of the last 130 years and the services they provide.
And my only question is, do we have a criteria? Because if we open the door, where do we draw the line?
I'm happy to draft a proclamation and bring that next week for review.
I think it's a good point that Commissioner Edwards states, because in the past, celebrations for specific organizations, the board has not proclaimed. It's more of a larger context to a whole community. So, and that's a good question the board may want to have is really by concurrent with this recommendation, many others may follow, and then where we will stop.
Yeah, that's.
Because I do believe, a proclamation the board conducts, I'm not disregarding this event, is they encompasses the larger community of the county.
I have to say, I mean, a lot of these organizations do very good work for the community. And is that going to be the criteria, and how much work for the community? What is exceptional about it? Because we have a lot of service clubs and organizations in Thurston County that really put their heart out and try to do good things for our community. And I don't want to throw cold water on that because, they're all doing good, and each group thinks they're probably doing the better. I don't know the answer to that for sure. I belong to several groups that participate in doing good things. I don't know if I can tell you one does better than the other, and I am very concerned that we're going to open the door. And what has been the past history, I guess I would ask, maybe the county manager, do you have any past criteria?
Personally, I don't recall, and again, I'm getting old and I don't remember everything. I don't recall that any specific organization the board has recognized any specific organization such as the Elks Lodge.
Yeah.
So,
okay, I guess I'd do a follow-up then. Is there something unique other than the 130 years that has happened that is bringing this forward? I mean, they were at every inoculation process the county put on, or I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to come up, I'm grasping at straws, to be honest with you. I'm sure they've been doing great work, as have other organizations. And again, it just kind of goes back to opening the door. The original request that came in, was there something unique about it? Because we're spending some time on it now, but that's because we're dealing with it. And if we get 35 or 40 of these, because if we do one, we have to do it for all. So that is my concern. I don't want to throw cold water on the group, but is there something unique that came in about this request about community betterment? I know many of these organizations are having a hard time fulfilling their membership roles in recruitment and retention. And so, boy, I'm really in a quandary about, I'd like to recognize all the things they do. But it's almost like we need to have something specific to do it. I'll just say, in all honesty, I belong to, say, the Lions Club. Great group, the Kiwanis Club. I've been a member of the Kiwanis Club for 30-some years. And boy, they do a lot for the community. And if we start, where do we draw the line? Okay, so that's my input from the old guy on the board. Chair, where are you?
I'm kind of where you are. I mean, I guess, we haven't been inundated with, I mean, I'm kind of in a weird position because I've been trying to sort of pare back some of the proclamations. I just felt like they're more meaningful if there aren't 3 per week. So I've got that sort of floating around in my head. I understand the argument about, you're certainly correct. There is a ton of social service organizations in Thurston County. 130 years is a pretty significant thing, and it's not something that's being proposed to be every year. It's a one time. The only analogy that I can come up with that we've done is from a historical perspective is we did a proclamation for Home's First's 30th anniversary. They're not exactly the same type of organization, but it's a specific organization in the community that was celebrating an anniversary. And I believe we were not the only ones to do that. I believe at least one or more of the municipalities recognize that as well. So there's that precedent for it. I guess, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a difficult call. I mean, I was a recipient of Elks. I believe I was a scholarship recipient as well as a hoop shoot winner back in the day. So I know a lot of the programs that Elks do for kids, but maybe we should just take a look. The board could take a look at the proposed template at least, and maybe revisit this next week. Or we've got a month. I just like to see kind of the meat of it. I don't know like the history of the Elks or anything like that. I certainly would like to maybe make sure there's nothing, of concern there.
Can we have the county manager kind of get with whoever submitted that, or clerk?
Yeah, we'll get you a draft, and at that point you'll probably assess whether it's something you might want to consider. Okay.
Anything else, Commissioner Mejia? You were waiting for us.
Yeah, I was waiting because I wanted to hear kind of that historical, like, had it been done before for a community organization, or, but I agree with Commissioner Edwards. It's like, okay, well, where do we draw the line? Is it going to be for every anniversary that each organization is going to be like, well, this is significant for us. So it's just definitely something to think about.
Okay, well, let's just sit on that for a week, and I haven't had a chance to look at I saw that there was a fairly lengthy template being floating around the office, and we can take a look and see if that leads us to any different conclusion next Tuesday. Is that it, Amy, for proclamations?
Yes, thank you.
Let's go to advisory boards and commissions then.
There are no applications for boards and commissions this week, but I did include an email we received from Ann Shipley of the Fair Board, her resignation after more than 30 years of volunteering. So this is just here for your information.
Well, that's not good news.
If there is a recognition the board may consider, it will be a recognition to Ms. Ann Shipley for all the many years that she has been involved in the Fair Board. So it is a surprising sad news, but certainly we can work to give the board the opportunity to say thank you to Ms. Shipley when the time comes.
That would be nice, 30 years.
I'd just like to comment on something about that.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I guess, just to give you an example of her commitment, I was out announcing for the Rainier Rodeo Days over the weekend on Saturday, and here comes Ann driving the fair vehicle, and all the activity that goes along with that. I mean, you just don't have a more dedicated person to a particular cause, and she's carried that on. I mean, many years, she's a school teacher in the community and moving forward with this for 30-some years. So she is really an example of commitment to her community. I'll just let it go with that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay. Then, Amy, was that it on boards?
Yes, that was it.
Okay. Yeah, check-in is next.
Morning, Commissioners. Megan Porter, Public Information Supervisor. Just a very brief update for you. This week, you'll be seeing the final draft of the joint news release we did on the Habitat Conservation Plan with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. They went through their review process, and so we'll be providing you with that final draft this week to ensure you're okay with it before we put that out with them talking about the next steps in the HCP approval process. Pending any questions, that's what I have for you this morning.
Questions for Megan?
I'm sorry.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
Megan, when the county's putting out notices to the public and stuff, and I mean, I guess your expertise is communication with the public and whatnot. Do you work with those individual entities to maybe just to review what they're doing? Hey, this looks like this is about right, or well, you might not want to do it this way. You might want to do that. Do you have any involvement with that?
I'm unsure what you're asking. Are you talking about the departments?
Yeah, any departments and stuff. Do you review all their material before it gets mailed out?
All news releases, yes, but other
That's it.
material, no.
Okay. Okay.
But we are available anytime to any office or department to provide consultation on it.
Okay, good enough. Thank you.
Some departments have their own public information officer, right, Megan?
They have communication staff, yes.
Okay.
Or generally education and outreach staff.
Right. Okay. Okay, great. I don't have anything, so thank you, Megan. And that takes us to item 8, briefing/public hearing decisions pending.
There is nothing pending for you, Commissioners.
Okay, so we've sailed right through, although we have a lengthy number of commissioners items. So let's just take our recess. And at this point, it's 10:12. Let's come back at 10:25 and pick up with our commissioners items. 9 Habitat Conservation Plan will be first.
Thank you.
You're live, Commissioner.
Okay, we're live. Thank you. We're back on the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners agenda setting work session for this Tuesday, August 31st, 2021. It's 10:28 a.m. and we're picking up with item 9, which is a series of commissioner items, including some closed and executive sessions at the tail end. But we're starting with number 1, which is a habitat conservation plan update.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. I believe Jennifer Davis and Josh Cummins, or as well as Christina Chapeau. As you know, they're the leaders taking the habitat conservation plan to hopefully an approval by the federal government by the end of this year. On the parallel track, there is a lot of steps that we need to take in terms of purchasing property, lining up the whole credit approach that we're going to be going through after we get the plan approved. And today, staff is going to give you an update as to what the staff has been working related to this plan. Josh.
Thank you, County Manager. So I'll just kick it off real quick. That's exactly right. As we've said previously to the Board of County Commissioners, our commitment is to continue to provide updates as we move through the process with the Habitat Conservation Plan, and then hopefully to the ITP, the Incidental Take Permit. And Ramiro's right on. Remember, the big 3 streams that we're moving concurrently are pushing on the approval from the federal government for the draft plan that we submitted, that the county submitted for the HCP. Second is the land acquisition process for the mitigation lands that go into the credit process. And then third is drafting the ordinances that go into effect for you, the legislative body, to take action likely early next year. So the intent of this conversation is to provide another brief update on the timeline, mainly related to the federal approval of the HCP, but then also to engage on a discussion about communication. So one of the one of the really, I think, excellent things that the board has done is you've approved this draft of the Thurston County Habitat Conservation Plan. This is what's working its way through the federal government. Many of you read this plan. Our goal in CPED is to condense this into this for your review and understanding. We consider you, the elected officials, some of our best communicators in the community. And our goal is to distill that big packet into this for you to be able to communicate to folks throughout. So we've got a timeline discussion that we're going to have right now, but then also we want your feedback on the information that we've provided. This is not a done deal. This is the draft of communication. We're already having these conversations with community leaders throughout different organizations, but we feel it's really important to get your input early and often on the distilled information that we're trying to put together. So that was a big setup. Chris Chapeau is going to be our lead in this conversation. And Chris, is there anything more I should say, or should you take it away?
I can take it away. Thank you, Josh. Morning, Commissioners. For the record, Christina Chapeau, Senior Planner, Community Planning. So I'll start out with a status update on the HCP and the ITP. We are moving forward at a brisk pace, especially for the federal government. We expect to publish the draft EIS in late September. This is a critical milestone for finalization of our HCP and issuance of the Incidental Take Permit, the ITP. We are still on track for an ITP issuance or approval from the federal government Q1 or early Q2 of 2022. And at the same time, staff is working to create the implementation ordinance, which will come before your planning commission and then before this board for final approval and implementation about the same time, Q2 of 2022. We have been working closely with the service to address any questions or concerns they have in the Habitat Conservation Plan, and we'll continue to do that through the month of September in earnest. We have also started acquiring properties. And thank you to the commissioners who have sent folks our way. Staff continues to contact willing sellers, and we've had several sites that are in process and we're working on for potential acquisition at this time. Do want to do a bit of follow up on some questions that we've received. The packet that you received has communication information. You also should have received 4 pages or 2 pages back and front handouts. And this provides you a picture of how the permitting process is envisioned moving forward under the Habitat Conservation Plan once approved by the service. The permit applicants will come directly to the county. They will not have to go to the federal government. The applicant determines their area of impact, and there's a mitigation fee that is paid based on that area that the applicant has determined where they want to put their house, their development, their single family structure, or an accessory building. Now, the Habitat Conservation Plan does allow for applicants to pursue their own habitat conservation plan should they choose not to go through the county. But the county will continue to collect those fees and make sure that the mitigation is ahead of those debits that are coming in from our permit counter. Those fees then go to create our conservation land system.
Is this a pause for questions?
It was actually technical issues, but if there are questions.
Okay. Well, I thank you for that technical difficulty, because I really think that we as commissioners need to think about having, I know this is just going to be a very quick overview, but I think we do need to set something up for the public. So some kind of a work session, so it's made more readily available to the public. Here we're coming to a close. It looks like, looks like we're getting coming to a solution here on the HCP, and we're going to be having informational discussions with the staff's going to be bringing this more in detail to the commissioners, and I think we ought to at least have like an hour dedicated, and maybe some incrementally as we move forward. Because just think of the time and effort that the county has put into this, and this does, I know this is just a start, but this just doesn't do it justice for what really has been put into this process. So I don't want to throw cold water on Chris's presentation. I just think that we really need to dedicate a little more time involving the public through public notification if they want to listen. Okay, that's all.
I'm going to agree with Commissioner Edwards on this. I presented this Friday at the Realtors Association, and I touched base with Josh about this before I went over there, and there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of interest, not only, from that group, but from a lot of community members that have been reaching out in regards to this. And I believe just setting an hour work session to go through this in depth, so we're able to be prepared to answer some questions when we're out in the community and give this amazing work that the county staff have been just working on this whole time. It's really incredible, and I think things like that, the community needs to know.
Thank you for that, commissioners. That's right on track with our thinking as well. We wanted to get this over to you so you see these papers, and we'll have the staff talk about some of the public participation that's already occurred. But we've got everything stacked. I think it's good. It's helpful to remember that one way we could do this is wait for the federal government to approve the plan at the beginning of next year, and then begin the conversations about how to implement it. Instead, we're moving concurrently. And so we're trying to stack these things as quickly as possible to serve the citizens. We think a work session is a great idea. And there's no cold water here. That's exactly, we're right in line with that. So thank you for that, commissioners. That sounds great. I think it would be helpful to talk about in terms of the near-term timeline with public participation. That might be helpful on the DEIS.
Sure. So in the near term, we have got a couple of public events coming up. The first one is actually in a few weeks. It will be for the to discuss the conservation portions of the Habitat Conservation Plan. What kind of science went into this? What does the conservation program look like in the HCP, and how will that be implemented? That is proposed to be a stakeholder, or excuse me, a community meeting on the 24th of September. We will then have the draft EIS, like I said, is anticipated to be published at the end of September, and in early October, we will be having a couple of public meetings to discuss what's in the environmental impact statement, or the draft EIS, and provide the public with an opportunity to ask questions. And that will be facilitated by the county and by the service.
So I guess maybe one of the questions might be, where in that timeline of public meetings that we already have might the commission think that they would like to hold their work session as well? Kind of before or after we get some of that public input?
Oh, is that a question to me?
To the board. To the board.
I thought you were asking Chris that question, to be honest with you. Not that I don't listen. You're wondering about when do you think we should fit this in that Commissioner Mejia and myself have been talking about?
So you just heard that.
I guess I don't really know for sure, but I'd like to be able to review this material that we've just gotten and then maybe make that decision.
Yeah, and that was my suggestion. How about let staff finish with the presentation of this small packet of information. At this point, we're not asking you to approve anything.
No, I know that, but I mean,
it's just an update, and maybe after you have the opportunity to review this, then I'll touch base with you and coordinate with Josh and his staff as to when will be the right time for an hour-long briefing.
There you go.
That work?
Yep, that sounds good to me.
Go ahead, Chris.
Sure. So for a bit of technical difficulties there, I just wanted to quickly touch on, there's a lot of questions around how to calculate mitigation fees, and we can go into much deeper, in-depth details in the briefing that we have. But in general, the size of your impact area, and the bigger the impact area and the nicer the habitat, or the higher quality of habitat, the higher that mitigation fee is going to be. And the property owner has a lot of control over what that mitigation fee is going to look like for them, depending on what they decide to do with their property, how they decide to site, and that sort of thing. The cost per credits do depend on which service area you're building or developing in, and this is tied greatly to the cost of land. In Thurston County, the cost of land is highly different between where you are in Olympia or if you are in South County. And we did, when we created that cost per credit, we did take that into account. So you will see that there is kind of an estimated range of, fees. Again, it depends on the impact. The larger the impact, the higher that, that mitigation fee can be. There is a formula for that. It's in the HCP, and we'll go over that in more detail at that hour-long or briefing that is set up in the near future. We are working towards acres needed for our mitigation program. Each of the service areas has their own need, and instead of taking a shot at all of those acres all at once, we're breaking that down into bite-sized pieces. So we have 2-year goals for each of the service areas. And those 2-year goals you can see are on your handout. In our South County, or in our YPG South, we've already exceeded, our acquisition goals for the first 2 years. So that's great. So we're focusing our efforts in other areas like the YPG North, which is our Lacey area, or YPG East, which is the Yelm area. And then moving right along, how we develop mitigation credits off of those lands that are purchased is pretty similar to how property owners determine their, it's actually very similar to how property owners determine their mitigation needs or their credit needs. It's the area that we've conserved, and we multiply that by that habitat value, and that gets us our credits earned, which means if there is full management on more preferred soils and we have occupancy of those species, we get more credits, which is why enhancement is a big portion of our conservation plan and program. I am going to stop there and ask if there's additional questions that we can focus on in additional meetings.
Well, I might jump in real quick here too. So the goal of today's briefing was just to, like the county manager said, give you this packet of information for your review. It touches on kind of all three of those items: the land acquisition, the ordinance, and the draft environmental impact statement, the plan that's working through the process. You know, in our minds, we envision not only the work session with the public, but also a work session on each one of those three main topics, so that you can really dive deeply into the costs first for the citizens. We used the data that we've received from folks like Mr. Tibetan and others that have gone through their own individual HCP process and compared it with the calculator that Chris has created on what it could have been if we would have had this HCP. So we could walk through that in more detail. The land acquisition would be a separate conversation that we'd like to have with the board to ensure you guys, so the board is aware of the different areas, the successes that we've already had in those two areas, and the work that we could use in the other areas. And then to prep you as the ordinance is coming into place, so that you're aware of what you're going to be working on in terms of the legislation. And then finally, just for the near term, as the board is considering the budget upcoming, I want to make sure that what Chris just relayed about the mitigation fees and funds, we are going to have a request in the budget process that sets up a new fund that has, essentially, it's kind of a revolving fund, and Robin could probably use better language than I can. But we need to have a place where the money that is paid by the applicants goes into a pot, and then that money is used to help with the mitigation of the land. That's making sure that it's got as much credits out of it as possible through mowing or all the different items that the land takes for upgrading. So I want to make sure that was in your head as well, that there will be a budget request coming very soon to you tied to the mitigation fund, HCP mitigation fund. Any questions, commissioners?
I don't until I get a chance to review this.
Hearing none.
Looks good though, thank you.
Back to Josh. Is that it for today?
If we're good on HCP, I have one more thing I'd like to share.
Go ahead.
So I really appreciate the hard work of our community planning team. Chris has really demonstrated leadership in the HCP and then other items. And I really wanted to provide my appreciation to Jennifer Davis, who has tendered her resignation, will be departing county service on September 30th. And it's hard for me to I want to take a moment here and say thank you to Jennifer. She didn't have to come on board with us in the first place. Coming from the Planning Commission, she was doing a great job there, but I really appreciated that she took an opportunity to come join county staff and really put the trains back on the track. She had huge success in all of the areas that we requested in terms of getting the habitat conservation plan back on track, which we're experiencing today, having the comprehensive plan submitted to Commerce, which now we've got that overdue status and all that taken care of. We don't even think about that anymore. The Shoreline Master Program, we realized that it's got some work to do, and now we've sourced some of those areas. But more importantly than all of the policy work that Jennifer was able to accomplish, she built a team behind her of leaders. And as you can see from the folks that pop on the camera from community planning, Jennifer's done a great job in that. So while we're going to miss Jennifer, we've appreciated the work that she's accomplished, and we appreciate the work that she's built in her team, and that we'll be able to continue it going forward. So I know it might be kind of a surprise, but I wanted to make sure and take this opportunity to say thank you to Jennifer and to the board for your leadership as well.
I make a motion not to accept that resignation.
I tried.
Do I have a second?
So,
Been moved and seconded.
yeah. And if I may, Commissioner,
Yep.
thank you, Josh. Thank you. Stole words out of my mouth because I really want to make sure we give Jennifer the accolades that she deserves. And this and what I call, relatively speaking, short tenure here as a county employee, and the leadership that she has provided has been remarkable. You well stated, Josh, all the accomplishments that she has done for the county and for the citizens and residents of the county. But it's the culture that she has set in the group is what is going to be long-lasting consequences, positive consequences. And at least from my humble point of view, thank you, Jennifer, for everything that you have done. And again, it's only far few in between that will have leaders like you. They make a mark in such a short period of time. So thank you.
Thank you all. It's been my pleasure to serve the county. And I think being a public servant is a calling. And I think that there are many hardworking public servants working for the county, and you have great leaders that you should feel free to continue to work with as we move all of these things forward through community planning and all of our other departments. But it's been my pleasure, and I think we have accomplished a lot. I am sorry it's been so short, but I think it's been worthwhile, and I've enjoyed working with all of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm kind of speechless, so I did know about it, but I'll hopefully have a chance to connect with you here in the next couple of weeks on a bunch of stuff. But thank you. The clearing of kind of backlog of work through community planning has been very impressive. Been very just proud to be able to report to the community what your team has done. Like Josh said, there's just been so many things that when I got on board, there were so many things that were well behind schedule, and we've just been able to get a lot of work done. You've been able, I mean, we're the tail end of it, but it requires the CPED team to really just dig in and get the support of the board and planning commission. And so we appreciate it. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Josh, for.
I know, Josh just put a.
That was a Debbie Downer closing comment, Josh.
I wanted to do it now. We've got a whole month to pick her brain. So now we just pull the Band-Aid off and now let's heal it up.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, commissioners.
All right, thank you. Let's go to item 9 sub 2, which is a home fund project model. This is an informational item. I see Tom Webster and Keely is there as well. We've got a short PowerPoint in our packets. And County Manager, do you want to set up what we're trying to do here?
Yes, and this is a follow-up to the planning session on August 13th. The board it was focusing on a couple options of funds. Staff walked you through, as you may recall, in the PowerPoint presentation, on all the many different funding sources that we currently have, and also with potential additional funding sources that we also could get access to related to addressing housing and homelessness here in Thurston County. The result of that conversation, as you may recall, was a couple of follow-ups. One is for staff to come back to the board and give you a little bit of a model project. So you will hear today 2 models of potential projects and how those existing funding sources could help those potential model projects, and also staff will give you a perspective on the gaps that we have on those model projects, which is additional funding sources the board may consider. One is the 1277, is an allocation that is coming to the county. The other one is the home fund, which you have discussed in the past. And also the next step, I believe, it was depending on this conversation, how it goes today, there was an interest for the board to set a public hearing related to a potential action by the board to implement a home fund in the county. And you had those conversations on the planning session, and I believe one of the items that you would like to see is really a formal letter of support from the cities of Lacey and Tumwater. And so all that is just encapsulated in the item today for you. So again, today is Tom and Keely will walk you through as to those model projects and how and then the funding sources can play a role in implementing those potential projects.
Just a clarifying comment, for the letters, it was Lacey, Tumwater, and South County, correct? That's what I remember, that we were gonna include South County.
I don't recall the South County, but we can include it.
I thought all the jurisdictions.
Yeah. That's what I remember.
Yes, I apologize if my notes doesn't reflect that, but yeah.
Because it potentially affects all the
certainly.
jurisdictions. Yeah.
Tom, your show.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners. Tom Webster with Public Health and Social Services. I believe you have a PowerPoint presentation, but is it okay for me to share my screen to bring that up?
Go ahead.
Great. So hopefully you can see my screen. And so the first couple slides I'm going to walk through fairly quickly because this should be similar, and it's similar to what Keely presented a couple weeks ago at your planning session. It's really kind of an overview of the funding sources that we do have that are focused on the capital and operating funds for this. So we didn't include all the funding sources that we kind of shared with you last week, but really those that can help support capital and operating costs for new affordable housing units. So we have our two federal programs, the Home and CDBG, that we use. Home can be used for capital, but not for operating costs. And this is what we use to fund our current pipeline projects. CDBG, as you know, is rotated throughout Lacey, Tumwater, and the South County. That can be used for some acquisition and some infrastructure-related costs, although not new construction activities. And it's very limited in terms of what it can be used for operating costs. We do have our 2060 local document recording fee that also we pair with Home to support our pipeline projects. 1406. We have around $800,000 to $900,000 and we combine all the jurisdictional funding together. That can be used to support capital projects. It can also be used to support the operations of new permanent supportive housing units. So there's some flexibility with that funding. Our 2163, which is our other document recording fee, cannot be used for capital funds and is currently funding our homeless crisis response system, although it can be used to support operating costs, although most of that money has already been spoken for. And then we have our 1277 funds, which will really become primarily available beginning in early 2022. That is not intended to be used for kind of capital costs, although it can be used for acquisition, so acquisition of the building, but not for construction costs. And it can be used for operating expenses. We'll learn more about those funds as Commerce provides additional guidance. So those are kind of a high-level overview of our current funds for capital and operating. The other kind of one-time sources of funds that we do have that could support this are under the American Rescue Plan Act. We're receiving an allocation under the Home Program of just over $3 million. That can be used to support capital activities, although it's not intended to be used for operating. It can be used for some housing choice vouchers, but primarily not for operating costs. And then the American Rescue Plan Act, this estimate, the $8 to $20 million, is really rough based on just some preliminary conversations that would require all the jurisdictions, so specifically Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, of contributing a portion of their ARPA funding to an affordable housing project. That can be used for capital. I believe it could also be used for operating, although that is time limited through 2024 when those funds would need to be spent. So it's not a long-term source of operating funds. So that's a kind of a high-level overview of the funds we do have available. A couple others I did want to mention briefly is there are local other
Hold on,
jurisdiction.
Tom, hold on.
Sorry, Tom. I would just, before you leave that slide, do you know what the city's ARPA estimates are by any chance?
I've heard different amounts talked about. So Olympia has, I hesitate to kind of share kind of preliminary conversation. So there's been ranges from jurisdictions, and I don't know if Ramiro is comfortable sharing, but I think Lacey was talking about a fairly substantial potential investment, as well as City of Olympia with Tumwater, maybe closer in the $1 million range. But both Lacey and Olympia have been talking about possible allocations of several $1 million. But I hesitate to kind of nail them down on a number because I know they're still kind of preliminary discussions unless Ramiro has any additional information.
Chair, I'd like to have a comment when I get a second, please.
Okay, well, just so you know, I mean, I heard the mayor of Lacey over the weekend say that Lacey was willing to sink every single dollar they received into this effort. And I just didn't I know that they're on a different formula than the county. So I wasn't sure what we were talking about when he made that statement, but that's why I asked. Not really what they'd committed, but just what they're actually receiving through the state formula or the federal formula.
Yeah, I believe the cities are going through their own decision-making process with the city councils. And what Tom stated is perhaps the proposal from staff, but as far as I know, it has not been a formal allocation by the cities after the legislative bodies have weighed in on this. So, but the estimate that Tom is providing today, I think is a good indication will be probably right in the close to the $20 million if everything comes together.
Commissioner Edwards, you had something?
Yeah, kind of off topic from what you're hitting on right now, but as we move forward on discussions on what we might do on this issue, is there any chance, like under program, you've got a lot of numbers and acronyms, so to speak, but for the public that's not familiar with what we're even talking about, could we have kind of a glossary or something attached to these type of informational publications that are put out so that the public might know that, 1406 is whatever it is. And, the home fund, CDBG, all that. Very few people, we work with these issues regularly, but in the name of keeping the public up to speed on what we're working at and having an understanding of what we're doing, would that be something that you folks could include in your presentations?
Yes, happy to do that. And it's a good point because we do get into our own little bubble here talking about the acronyms that are familiar to us. So we do have a summary sheet that we can provide and attach to this, and I can send it to the clerk of the board to kind of attach to this presentation to include. That has a little description of each of these programs.
Yeah, and then I mean, we're going to be discussing this as time moves on, but just to make sure that when citizens do have an interest and they might go to the website and take a look, they've got something to refer to about, this funding source is from where, and how does it come about, whatever. Just a very brief, you don't have to put a synopsis in necessarily, but just something kind of brief so they'll understand what we're talking about. Okay, thank you.
Yep, will do. So the two other things I did want to kind of mention that each jurisdiction is developing or has developed a list of specific incentives that they can offer to support the creation of affordable housing through waiving of impact fees or connection fees, tax exemptions, density bonuses. So I know each of the jurisdictions are working on those. So that's also value that can be brought to kind of encouragement or incentivizing affordable housing development. And then last is there is a state rapid capital acquisition fund. This is a competitive process that will be happening later this year. The first round has already happened. The second round will happen in September, and the third round, we think, kind of end of the year. So there's a limited amount of funds potentially available from the state to support the acquisition of a property that we may be able to access. So that's, I know Keely kind of went over some of that a couple weeks ago with you. So that's just a high level overview of the funding sources. And then kind of just a couple bullet points on a county home fund, if this was to pass, is this would be targeted to those who make 60% or below of area median income. So AMI is area median income, so the lower income populations. It can serve both capital and operating needs, land purchases, hotel renovations, additional housing staff. So it's pretty flexible. 40% of that fund can be used for behavioral health services. So there is some flexibility there around behavioral health. It is a permanent funding source that could be bonded. And preliminary estimates are that Thurston County would kind of generate around 4.3, maybe $4.5 million per year, not including the Olympia Fund. Olympia generates a little over $2 million a year. So combined as a region, that would total, $6.5 to $7 million a year. But Thurston County, outside of Olympia, with the initial estimate is around 4.3 million per year that it would generate. So as Ramiro indicated, really kind of two possible projects that we want to kind of share with you that could benefit from a county home fund. The first is a hotel acquisition and conversion activity. So the county and the city of Lacey have been actively exploring the acquisition of a hotel, and then using that as either temporarily as a shelter and then for converting it to permanent supportive housing, or moving immediately to a conversion of permanent supportive housing. So the estimated acquisition cost for a hotel would be in the $4 to $6 million range. And we think that would be appropriate for the use of the ARPA funds as they can be spent pretty quickly. And also the renovation of that building to allow it to be used as a shelter could also be supported by either the ARPA funds or the home ARPA funds as possible funding sources. Based on discussions with Clark County that has implemented a similar model, they spent close to $1 million in renovations to turn a hotel into a shelter. So that's what this $750 to $1.5 million estimate is based on, is a Clark County experience. I'm doing this with a hotel they purchased of a similar size, but we'd really have to get into the hotel and do a more specific analysis of the specific property to come up with a better estimate on that. Again, kind of using the Clark County example, operating costs for a hotel that was turned into a non-congregate shelter would be, at least $1 million, maybe closer to $2 million a year to operate that space. So we're talking around a 100-room hotel that could be used as a non-congregate shelter. Those operating costs, 1277 could support some of those operating costs, but we don't expect the 1277 revenue to be sufficient to cover that full amount. As you'll recall, 1277, if we anticipate receiving, $3, $4, $5 million a year in that really is going to be needed to support our existing funding gap for other homeless services. We're receiving some COVID emergency solutions grants, dollars that are helping to fill our current funding gap in our service community. So 1277 could be used to support some of a new shelter, but probably not the whole amount. So really a county home fund would be a viable source to provide sustained operating costs if we wanted to use that space as a shelter. Eventually, I think the city of Lacey and the county is interested in the Regional Housing Council would be interested in converting the hotel into permanent supportive housing units. And that would be a more substantial rehabilitation to convert those hotel rooms, adding kitchen facilities, maybe combining the rooms, making them a little larger, making them more standalone as kind of permanent units, would be a substantial amount. We don't have estimates for what that would be at this point. But there's really no funding mechanism in now to kind of pay for those larger renovation costs. So a county home fund would be a valuable and important source in order to allow for the conversion of hotel rooms into permanent supportive housing units. And that would still probably only cover partial funding. There would still need to be other sources of leverage through state trust fund or tax credits to fully fund that conversion, not knowing exactly what that cost would be. So home fund, you could acquire a hotel with your existing ARPA money, maybe do a little renovation, maybe operate it for a year or two, but the long-term use of that property would really require a more substantial revenue source long-term to convert that into permanent supportive housing. So that is one project that we're looking at closely. The second project is kind of a land acquisition and new construction project. So working with the City of Olympia has identified a potential piece of property for acquisition. That cost would be in the $1.5 to $2 million range. Again, ARPA would be a good viable source of funding to support that acquisition. The initial thinking is to use this for a safe parking program for RVs and other cars that need a place to park. Again, ARPA funds may be able to use to support some of the site preparation for that from that land. County Home Fund, if it was passed, would also be another funding source. Estimated operating costs for safe parking, a little unknown. We've put in this $500 to $1 million estimate. Really depends if we kind of pair this with our scattered site pilot project. If that scattered site pilot project was to continue, whether this site would be added onto that site or kind of be incorporated into that, or whether it would be a standalone project. So there's a little uncertainty in terms of how that would be operated in conjunction with a scattered site program, but there would be some ongoing operating costs to operate a safe parking program there. Once again, 1277 may be able to support, a portion of that ongoing operation cost, but we don't have the funding to support ongoing operations. So a county home fund could be required as a sustainable source of operating costs. And then ultimately, if that piece of property was able to be converted and used for new construction of affordable housing, whether that's permanent supportive housing or just affordable housing in general, again, a county home fund could be a really valuable and necessary source of funding to provide that local incentive. So the property could go out and get trust fund or tax credits from the state. We know, for example, that the Lehigh project phase 2, new construction for a 64 unit building is, close to $23 million. So county home fund would certainly not be able to cover that full kind of construction cost, but would be a really valuable and critical portion of local leverage in order to raise that additional money. So kind of that's our second project. So this is just a summary of showing that with a hotel acquisition of using some of the ARPA money as a possibility for some of the initial acquisition and renovation costs, but long-term operation and long-term conversion to permanent supportive housing would require a home fund or another source of money in order to do that. And same with the land acquisition. Some of the initial costs may be able to be covered by ARPA or ARPA Home, but long-term operating and development of permanent supportive housing would require a home fund or other substantial funding source to move those projects forward. I guess I just asked, before I open up to questions, ask Keely if she has anything to add or anything I missed.
Thanks, Tom. So one thing I want to reiterate is that 1277 isn't a panacea of our funding gaps across the system. As a reminder, this last year, there were about $8 million in requests for projects in our current homeless crisis response system, leaving about a $4 million gap in what we could or could not fund to keep our current system whole. That gap was filled because we received a one-time infusion of emergency solution grants, COVID dollars. So we were able to fill that hole. So when we're talking about 1277 and the potential of it generating around $4 million a year, some of which must be set aside for permanent supportive housing, I think about 20% of that, it's not enough to fill the hole that would be the gap that would be left in our system in the projects that already exist. So it's just a reminder that it can solve a lot of problems, but it's not necessarily going to solve the greater gaps that already exist in our system.
Okay, Commissioner Mejia.
Yeah, so thank you for the presentation, but one thing that I find missing here is when we're talking about these projects, it's like the estimated, assistance that's going to be provided to people, like how many people are we going to help? I don't see that here, so when I'm talking to community members and they ask me that, so do we have estimates on how many people this would help, or? Yes.
So for the hotel acquisition, the hotel we're looking at has just over 100 rooms currently. As we convert that to permanent supportive housing, probably the number of rooms will be reduced a little bit. So one of the things we've heard kind of under the Regional Housing Council technical team is for these size projects is 60 to 80 is a good size for individual projects from a kind of operation management point of view. So I think each of these projects, you're really looking at probably in that 60 to 80 as permanent supportive housing units. You know, the hotel may be closer to 80 units that we would end up with at the end of the day with each of these projects. But that's an estimate, and we'd have to work with a developer to see what would be possible for that specific space.
Commissioner Mejia, I think Tom and Keela, I think you guys got that chart that Beth Dolio produced. And it's a different way of looking at the same thing, but I think it gets to the kind of concrete number that maybe Commissioner Mejia is looking for. I don't know if you've seen that, Commissioner, but basically it's just saying if the county's home fund and Olympia's home fund, looking at them together, that's the 6.6 million. And if you just put it toward the production of permanent supportive housing, without bonding on it, just spending the money that's coming in. So you could potentially do more than this if you bonded, but just looking at that and making a couple of very conservative assumptions, you'd essentially be able to produce 530 units over 10 years of fully supported and operationalized permanent supportive housing units. So that's kind of, I kind of liked that way of walking through it from as I talked about, like a forward flowing way of thinking about it versus backward, like, okay, here's what we've got going on. And here's if we plug this funding gap into it. And that's one way to think about it. But another way to think about the power of it is just to say that if this money source was dedicated to this purpose, this is what it would produce. And it's just kind of a real stripped down analysis, but it gave me a way to think about what could result, and you may not use all of it. You might bond and you might do more. You might not use all of it completely toward production of permanent supportive housing, because understand that 40% of it can be used for mental health, behavioral health related things, which is really kind of the powerful component of this law. Is it's got flexibility as to all the areas that we're struggling with the most and that the public seems to be most concerned about trying to address.
Yeah, and I think one way to think about it is Thurston County, the way the trust fund and tax credits works is probably we're not going to be able to successfully receive more than one project of trust fund and tax credit project per year. And probably even every year is a little optimistic. So over the next 10 years, we could probably, fund, hopefully, with this additional local money, be really competitive, 6 out of the 8 kind of over the next 10 years with having, projects, each of those projects being a 60 to 80 unit project that could be built with a combination of home fund and state dollars. It'd be great if we had projects all 10 years that were successful. I think that's probably optimistic. But with this additional funding to really be able to attract those high quality projects and developers that can create those 60 to 80 unit projects on a pretty regular basis. And in the past years, we've had one of these projects every 3 or 4 years. The past year, we've had both Family Support and Lehigh, which are 2 examples. But if we can have a more regular flow of these highly competitive projects that are going to trust fund and tax credits, and I think a home fund, the local leverage is really a key portion of being competitive at the state to receive those dollars. And it's attractive to the developers knowing that there's local resources that are available to put into these projects, makes it more attractive developers to come and build in Thurston County. So I would hope that over the next 10 years, we could have 6 to 8 successful, large, kind of 60 to 80 unit permanent supportive housing type projects that we'd be able to fund.
Commissioner Mejia, back to you.
No, I'll pass it to Commissioner Edwards.
Okay, Commissioner Edwards.
I guess there's an old statement, build it and they will come. And I think it applies here that most of these folks in need, we're already spending millions of dollars to help these folks, and they need some help. But if we encourage their lifestyle without any requirement, these folks are going to continue to come. Most of them are transplants. They've come here, now they're living here. I don't know how long they've been here, but we find that out when we have a police interaction or a medical interaction of where they're from. So if we don't put something at the front end to require treatment, for an example, for mental health and drug abuse, for an example, and we just allow without any requirements that they're involved in something to better their lives, I don't think we ought to let them move into these projects that we've got going. We should only be willing to help those that will help themselves because we've got so many from outside of the area. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from here. Millions of dollars already going in. We're not solving the problem. More and more are coming, and they will continue to come as long as we allow a deviant lifestyle. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'd like to hear more about preventative measures that we could get treatment for these folks for both mental health and drug issues, because that seems to be the bigger driver on bringing these folks to the situation that they find themselves in today where they need the help. So I'm not against helping, but we have to hold somebody accountable, and the individual has to be held accountable to a degree. So that's kind of where I'm at here. Thanks.
I would just say that, the real intent behind a lot of these is permanent supportive housing. Really, the supportive is the key word in that, is by providing this housing, connecting folks to those services, and provide the supportive services. So the real intent behind a lot of this housing is to connect people, to better connect people to those services. We are kind of also need to follow kind of both state and federal guidance around best practices for what's required of some of the federal funds that we receive. So the requirements around that. But the real intent is to provide those supportive services through this housing model to better connect folks to services that they are not receiving. We're trying to connect them when they're living in RVs and encampments. It's more difficult to make those connections. So getting people into permanent supportive housing, and I looked at Keely, she's the real expert on this. But I think by building this housing, we're better able to connect those folks to services.
I want to commend Tom. I want to commend you and Keely because your heart's in the right spot. I'm kind of a tough love kind of guy, and I just think we have to face reality with treatment, with requirements. And then those folks, we can help them out. Because if they're just there to be there, I'm afraid they'll never stop coming.
Can I ask something that's related to that, Tom or Keely? If we look at a classic, let's just say a classic, like the permanent supportive housing type project, let's say what Olympia is working on at Martin Way, or in Lehigh and all of that. And we say that we're targeting people at 60% of area median income. I mean, that suggests to me that the people that reside there, does that mean that rents are subsidized to where they're affordable by someone who's only making 60% of area median income? I mean, how does that work in terms of somebody who lives there? What are they paying, or how is that set, or how is that managed?
Yeah, so generally speaking, each project may be a little different, especially if there's kind of housing project vouchers from the Housing Authority can support that. But generally the way it works is folks will pay 30% of their income towards rent. And so they'll, the developer, whether that's Lehigh or Family Support Center, whoever it is, will determine the household income, and they will pay 30% of their income towards rent. And the rest is kind of subsidized through vouchers or just kind of the operating budget. And so we expect that a lot of folks, and these will be well below 60% of area median income. They may be closer to 30%. They're on Social Security or SSI. So it'll be an affordable portion of their rent, which is generally considered 30% of their income.
But is there a minimum threshold? They have to have some income? Or some people have vouchers and they can, or I mean.
There has, and I'd have to look, HUD had a minimum, there's typically been a minimum $50 rent limit. And so oftentimes there's a requirement that the minimum rent is $50 per month. But I'd have to check the latest kind of housing authority requirements around that. But HUD has typically had a minimum rent for that.
And some of the $1277 can go towards vouchers. So that's part of what the $1277 can be used for. And it really quickly, it's if I may mention that we've got the 1145 according to the PIT, like 1,145 unsheltered individuals at least living in our community without housing. But we're also looking at currently, according to the Department of Commerce, before the CDC eviction moratorium was overruled by the Supreme Court, landlords increasing rents by 25 to 75%. So we're looking and staring in the face of many, many, many more of our citizens that are currently housed, needing some other options. So it's just absolutely crucial that we start 10 years ago, but start now.
Okay, are there any more questions from the board? I'm going to make a proposal, but I want to make sure everybody gets their questions answered. Nope. Okay. So I guess I'm going to make a motion that because I've been talking to a lot of people about this over the last several months, and as Commissioner Edwards and I all like to kind of joke with each other. We don't always talk to the same constituents out in the community, but I'm hearing overwhelming support for this type of mechanism to address these types of problems. So I'd like to hear from the community. So I'm going to ask that we set a public hearing for, say, October 5th-ish. And at the same time, ask and it can be all of the municipality jurisdictions that would be affected to, hey, we're having a public hearing on October 5th. We would certainly like you to provide us your opinion. I'd like to formally request that of Lacey, Tumwater, Yelm, the other cities, so that they have ample time to discuss it amongst themselves and let us know what they think, as well as the public, and kind of get this conversation started. That's my proposal. I don't know if there's any other support for that.
So can I ask just some clarifying questions, Commissioner?
Yeah.
So the public hearing would be in order to have, the home fund proposal. I mean, what is going to be presented? Is it going to be the hotel acquisition and the land acquisition as our plan?
I guess we can discuss that. I was just considering the financing mechanism, essentially that the legislative action that the board would have to take in order to implement the 1590 sales tax. I mean, you could give examples of what it would be used for, list out what the uses are. I think the board has latitude to kind of lay that out. I wouldn't necessarily say it's to buy a hotel or to do this or that specifically. You can,
County manager's got his hand up there, Chair.
Yep, county manager.
Sir, listen, I believe your proposal is to seek all the jurisdictions' letter of support for the board. There's considering this home fund action. I can draft a letter, and to all the jurisdictions with a concurrence, because I believe that discussion happened on the planning session. And then you can probably sign that letter requesting what they intend at this point. Because what I'm hearing, the board is not quite there at the door to implement this home fund, where you're going through the process is assessing the intent, is assessing where you want to be, and what you like to have is perspective from the local jurisdictions and also perspective from the public. So the public hearing for your proposal, as I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong, is you just like to hear from the public the intent the board has to implement this home fund. The public hearing is not to receive public testimony that leads to an action to implement the fund. I think I'm tracking two different things here, but I believe Commissioner Mess is yours just to hear from the public about the intent. Is that right?
I'm trying to understand your use of the word intent. I think I'm agreeing with what you're saying. I mean, the idea is the board hasn't made a decision to do this, but we have discussed that we would like to hear, I'd like to hear from the public. And Commissioner Edwards mentioned putting on the ballot. And I said, well, what about an intermediate step of a public hearing, a well-advertised public hearing where we get the input from the public?
I guess to clarify the use of the word intent is without having a resolution, because this would require a resolution or an ordinance for you to implement this taxation. This public hearing will not have that instrument. It's just to hear from the public your intent of considering this potential funding. Is that what I'm tracking? Or you want to have an actual ordinance ready for this public hearing? So, which is two different things.
It's two different things in one hand, but it's the same thing on the other hand. And I'm thinking about, I mean, I want to hear what the public thinks about the idea. Whether there's a resolution that's been drafted, whether we need to put our lawyers to that level of effort at this point, I don't honestly care. I want to know what the public thinks about the idea, the concept. And, you know,
Okay,
I'm fine with it not having a formal resolution, you know, ready. I think it's a pretty simple concept. It's 1/10 of 1% sales tax in order to fund these type, you know, X, Y, Z. We can lay out what the legal allowances are. It includes mental health, behavioral health treatment, housing, etc. So that's what I want the input on. I don't personally care if there's a resolution drafted or not at that juncture. It's not like we would close that hearing and take action. We're not, you know, it's not that kind of situation.
I'll second that, I guess.
Commissioner Edwards, go ahead.
I guess for additional discussion, I guess, I think that you find out what the public wants when you put something on the ballot. And yes, I did bring up the fact that I thought it would be appropriate to put something like this on the ballot and then let all sides, I mean, whether it's staff or yourself or advocates in the community, explain the problem and get something out there as to what the proposal would end up with if the public voted for it. And the public would very possibly vote for it if they were convinced that it wasn't just throwing money at the problem. I do think accountability is such a big piece of what we're doing. And I know Olympia, it seemed to me that their public ended up supporting that home fund, if I remember right. I don't have that on the top of my tongue right now. Isn't that right?
Yes. Yeah, I think they got about 64% or so.
And I just think that we don't have enough information out to give the public at this point in time to have a meaningful public hearing. I don't know, you could have a town hall I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but my concern is that if we jump out there without adequate discussion and covering all these issues from all segments of our society, like you mentioned, I mean, you and I probably have a different constituent base. But to pass something, now, a majority of the board could do something councilmatic, but I don't think you get community support by doing that. I do think the community, if they get a chance to vote on it, then it's kind of like, well, I had my say. And I know that's going to take a little longer to do that, but I think it'll take several, I don't know if you want to call them public hearings or town halls, but it'd take a lot of work to drum up the support to pass something like that. And I think if there was accountability built into it, it has a possibility. I don't think we'd get any support, even if we passed it from a councilmatic perspective. And I mean, I've kind of made my position clear that I'm not against helping people, but I am against just continuing to throw money at it without having requirements in place. And I realize some of these folks are just marginal, and the whole thing about rent, that makes sense, but we're never gonna have our streets be free of the problem we see every day to day until we get some accountability built into it. And that's where I'm at. And again, I'm not heartless, I'm a realist.
So we had the proposal from Mr. Menser, and I believe Commissioner Mejia supported that, if you can verbalize that.
Yeah, so I'll support the October 5th public hearing with the intent, but.
October fish.
5th-ish, or setting a public hearing in the future, I'll just say that with the intent of, you know, just to get the discussion going. I feel like this is a discussion that definitely, it will definitely stir up a discussion in the community. So might as well get it started some way or another. But you know, for me, like if we were to do like a home fund, I would like to see funds invested in senior housing, because we're seeing, you know, it's, you know, the rate of seniors is going up, and multi-generational housing, and you know, just invested into projects like that. I feel like that would support that. But again, I see with the hotel acquisition, you know, solving that. I'm just the 60 to 80 people. Makes me nervous because we're at 1,000. How many? What was the census report, Akili? Was it 1,200 and
1,145.
145, and I don't know. I hear both sides of the matter. I hear the frustration in the community of us, you know, of seeing this problem and feeling like, you know, they're throwing money at it. But I also see the other side where there's a lot of work going into building and investing in different ways that we can do this. And so, yeah, I'll support setting a public hearing for this.
Thank you. You know, the $1590 have a lot of flexibility, and they can reach those types of projects that Commissioner Mejia is talking about. By working through our RHC, we can prioritize what are the most important and impactful things. We're just not getting housing units for folks in that you know, super affordable range, that 60%. As I understand, that's even a more targeted definition than some of the other programs that are like go up to 80% or other definitions of state programs. So we're really trying to focus these dollars on that segment of the housing market that's not being served. And as Keely said, we should have started 10 years ago, trying to address this. So we're kind of late getting to this. And I think people are, they're tired of the kind of homeless response Band-Aid type of approach, and they're really looking for more durable long-term solutions, which is building permanent supportive housing. So I think that this is the right conversation for us to have, and we definitely need to hear from the public and our neighboring jurisdictions that are going to be incorporated. And I think if we give them a formal prompt from the board to weigh in, they will, because this is an important issue. And we'll get a lot of great feedback, and October 5th will be a great, I think, target date for trying to bring that conversation together. So I appreciate the board's support on that. And then Ramiro, I can work with you on.
I have 2 items, and you will see a letter for your signature requesting the jurisdictions on support based on your intent of the home fund, establishing a home fund. And also you will see an AIS setting a public hearing. Perhaps may not be on October 5th, since we don't have a meeting next week, but certainly will be sometime mid-October for your consideration. So we'll go through that process.
I'd say that, it's better to do it not on a Board of Health day for a meeting like this, because we're going to get a lot of public comment. So that's why I'm saying the 5th, because the next meeting, I believe the next Tuesday is the Board of Health. And that's not a good day to have this kind of a hearing. And then we're into late October. So anyway, that's my suggestion. Go ahead, Commissioner Edwards, you had something?
Just as a continuation, you've got a motion and a second, additional discussion, I might add. And my concern is that we might not have enough time between now, basically just talking about a month, to get those commitment letters back from the other jurisdictions, if you will. And so, I mean, I'm thinking more mid-October might give you a better representation of what the jurisdictions might feel about this. And then you can couple that with public comment, I guess, and see how that moves forward. I am not against hearing from the public. I'm very much in favor of hearing from the public. My concern is that a vote might take place and it be councilmatic type of a vote rather than a vote of the public. I'm a big believer that the public does have a heart, and if we educate them right, we could get there. So I'm going to go, I'm not going to oppose this motion. I'm going to be in favor of it, because I think anytime we can bring the public involvement in, it creates a healthier process.
Okay.
So that's my discussion, sir.
We do have a canceled TBD meeting on the 19th, so I guess we have those two possibilities. The 5th, I would really not like to have it on a Board of Health night.
I agree. So let's work through the logistics, and I tend to agree with Commissioner Edwards. If you plan to send a letter to the jurisdictions for them to have a support letter, it will be a little bit tasking, because they need to convene as a legislative body to discuss this and weigh in that request. So having it on the Tuesday, October 19th, may give additional time. So.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Keely. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Let's go on to dangerous dog designation.
So hopefully
County, this is the fun of being a county commissioner.
Yeah, so I have
just to pivot from topic to topic like
Nicole
this.
Miller attend this meeting, so she can experience the breadth of different issues the board deals with on a daily basis. So this dangerous dog designation, this is the 3rd week that I bring this item to your attention. Last week, you requested a couple of additional information. One, whether the property in which the dog who attacked the smaller dog is fenced. It is not fenced. And also you requested if there's any additional information to give you the perspective of whether the dog who was killed was on somebody's, on the attacker dog property or not. there is not we tried to reach out to the owner of the pit bull. We reach out to the owner of the dog who was killed, and still we don't have any evidence related to whether this dog was in somebody's property or not. Did I have a conversation with Elizabeth Partridge on this? And I heard words, and I wrote this down, is the likelihood of this dog was attacked on its own property is likely, because based on the perspective that you see.
Can I get a clarification there? You said this dog was attacked on its own property.
It's likely.
So you think that the dog that was killed was attacked by the offending dog on the?
That's what
Oh.
it's likely than not. That's what.
But we don't have any proof?
We don't have any evidence.
Nobody saw anything take place on another property?
No, and that's, you have reviewed that, all that information, so that's the extent that I can give you. So the suggestion at this point is for you to consider declaring this dog a potentially dangerous dog. And with that approach, you will allow the owner of the pit bull to come back and offer their perspective as to why you should rescind that designation. So that is the proposal before you. And that was the conversations with Elizabeth. Doesn't get to the potential dangerous dog. It's just a potential dangerous dog, and the code allows for the owner of the pit bull in this case to appeal that decision.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Is Karen here for this item?
No.
Okay. Okay, I think that approach could work. I mean, I kind of was going to ask Elizabeth, I mean, this is not a criminal case, but the way our code is structured kind of tracks a criminal statute in the sense that there's elements and then there's a list of like defenses, and in a criminal law, those would be like affirmative defenses, which Washington law puts the burden on the person accused, the defendant, to prove by preponderance of the evidence those affirmative defenses. And if you kind of apply that type of, burden of proof on this scenario, there really is, you could argue that, I was just thinking this morning, this would be a way to get to what Ramiro is proposing on a more legalistic sort of way of thinking, is that we know that the prima facie elements of the actual, declaration are established by evidence that we have. We're kind of guessing about, it seemed like maybe the affirmative defense, I'm going to call it that, applies, but we really don't have enough evidence to establish that. So the board, I think, could reach the conclusion of a potentially dangerous dog designation based on that way of thinking, and analogizing it to a criminal code analysis. And then they've got and then this process has that extra piece, which, is that they have a chance to come back and respond to it.
So an additional perspective on the proposal, Commissioner, I don't disagree on your legal dissertation, really. It's more about the perspective that I offer you is you do accomplish two things with this. You're responsive to the complainant, and your response to the complaints that you receive. And as a result, you also give the other party the opportunity to rebuttal this. And I think the designation of potential dangerous dog achieves both.
Is that the pleasure of the board then? Is everybody in agreement on that idea?
I believe that'll work.
Okay, three thumbs on that.
Okay, so you will see a letter on this matter, and we'll move that direction.
Okay, that brings us to ARP funds.
So we presented to you last Thursday the draft of the fiscal recovery fund. We have provided to you, and thank you very much, Robin, for the hard work behind all this. It's a little more in detail as to what this recovery plan, the draft, that needs to be submitted to the Department of Treasury. Where you see the description on the plan itself is in detail of the proposed table that we submitted to you last Thursday. And that particular is not included on, my apologies. There is another piece of information that is not included in your packet. It is the layout of the allocations that we needed to discuss this morning. So this is not included in your packet, so give me just a second and I will print up that because that's the key of your.
Is that the proposals for consideration?
Yeah, I don't have it in my.
Okay, I've got it in mine. Is that what
If you
you're
look
referring
on
to?
page 11 of the plan, it's got the table of items that are
I don't have
proposed funding.
pages. Oh, yeah, correct, one page, that page. Good.
Okay, got it. It is included, sorry. I'm trying to catch up.
It doesn't look exactly the same, but it is.
Okay, got it. So all the draft plan that needs to be submitted tomorrow. And again, just to refresh the conversation that we had on Thursday, this is an overarching allocation. There's many opportunities that will come your way to make your final decisions. You have already made decisions related to the contributions to Thurston Strong, as well as United Way. And on page 11, what you see on this column is all the approved amounts in more detail. Remember, you made an allocation of $10 million for Thurston Strong. And within that $10 million, you set aside $1 million for agricultural. So at this point includes only the 1.1 for agricultural grants. And also the United Way allocation, which also is on the approved amount. Now, on the under consideration, you also would provide a perspective on the overall as to how you may consider setting aside those buckets at this point. But I also asked you on last Thursday that I will be asking you to make a decision on two elements of those buckets. And I'm gonna give the floor here in a minute to Robin to explain a little more in detail, but just want to get to the punchline related to for you to consider give direction on the county's website, and that's on page 11, item 1.7C, to move into the approved column, so we can go ahead and move that. And the other option, and the other item that I would like for the board to consider based on the conversations that we had last time is the emerging needs or emergency medical service staff. Last week, we have present to you $150,000. Kirk Harding is here to give additional perspective, and we have increased this amount to $300,000, and that's the other item that I will ask the board to consider moving it to the approved amount. That is the initial overview of this. Robin, additional perspective on this?
I have a question on this. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the emergency medical portion, we upped that from what it was. I'm still curious about the website, and I know I'm not the one to be asking questions about that, but creating a user-friendly website, is that kind of what we're talking about, and that kind of money is involved to do it?
That is the objective. This project has been in the books for a couple of years. And we have raised some money within the IT projects as we usually do, but it's not enough. In the last year, we have seen it has become very apparent that the county's webpage is outdated.
Oh, I agree. You're not gonna get an argument there.
The county's webpage doesn't provide the services the citizens are looking for. We're moving into the board already approved into the ERP funds, the ARP application. They amend the system, they all ready for the permitting process, but we need the environment. We need to have a very robust environment that we can house all the new technology for the public to access that. So think about this, is ideally related to permits for an individual to do everything electronically, submission, revisions, and approvals electronically, without having to come to the county ideally in person. And the current website doesn't give us that ability. That is the purpose of this.
No, I'm not questioning the mechanism or what it's gonna accomplish, but, so it's more than just create a website, you know? or
Yes.
a website.
So I'm
Robin's got
going to
some-
jump in if I may and
Yes.
address that is this what it really costs question. And yes, it is. Because we are creating more than just a friendly page that you land on. We're creating the infrastructure of the website. And if you talk to Dennis or Megan, they can tell you a lot more than I can about how right now we have two different platforms. They're confusing. They don't support modern technology architecture like Ramiro was explaining for the permits and other e-commerce. And we need to create an entirely new platform for our webpage that supports the type of interaction that we want to have with the public. And that's why it's eligible for recovery fund money. But it is, we went out to bid, and the bids were significantly higher than we ever thought they would be. But it is going to cost us somewhere between $500,000 and $700,000.
Megan's got a microphone.
Can I add to that just a little bit? It's more than just building the back end. It's having consultants come do user testing, create a whole new design for the website, work with all the stakeholders. And so it is a fairly decent hefty price.
You can't do it on a weekend.
We can't, yeah, we don't have internal staff that could manage that project and actually build the whole back end as well.
Commissioner Mejia?
I have a question. Is the price included in this? Because part of it is working with the stakeholders, but also another part of that is working with the people that actually use the website that come in. Is there going to be outreach towards, or a committee or task force or whatever that's gonna really, we're gonna get the input from the end user?
Yes, so that they use a UX style, which is very focused on the end user and usability testing. So they'll go out into the community, they'll talk to stakeholders, they'll have them come in and actually test the website to make sure that it's meeting the goal of the end user as well as us.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a huge process. It'll take at least a year.
Okay. Simple question for a dummy.
Ramiro, are we gonna get into the $300,000 EMS? I thought Kurt was gonna give us some background.
That's the next item, and Kurt is here to provide additional perspective. Kurt, are you still there?
I am.
So as you may recall, the initial request, the initial assessment from Kurt last week was about $67,000. And this is really related to the impacts the hospital are having in capacity. There is a delay as to when they admit patients. They've been brought to the hospital. And as a result of the delay in admitting patients, then the EMT personnel needs to be parked in the ambulances caring for those patients. And the result of that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kurt, is affecting the other calls that might be coming into the system. If we don't have that capacity to answer those calls. So the approach, the Kurt is hiring a temporary staff to address the back end and the gaps within that. Commissioner mentioned last week, you clearly stated this is a systemic issue. I agree. It's larger than just funding EMTs at this point, but we need to do something. And we propose 150. Commissioner Edwards stated perhaps it's more. And so Kurt is here to provide that perspective.
Oh, are we waiting for Kurt to jump in, or are we open for comments, or what are we doing?
Commissioner, let me just do a recap. The county manager did a great job. I just want to add a couple more things and then answer your questions, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So just real quick to add on to what Romero said. This started back in July when I briefed the board on a Thursday morning and talked about where we were with this hospital capacity issue and also with ambulance transport capability. The impacts are really twofold right now as we see them today. One is emergency department delay, which Romero alluded to, and then the other is the lack of ambulance transport in the field when the emergency departments are able to take in patients. I want to iterate up front that we are working with all 12 fire agencies, the 2 private ambulance companies, the 2 hospitals. Everybody is working to try to achieve solutions in this. And our HPU, which stands for High Probability Unit Resource, is a surge capability that we can, 1, put into the field to transport patients, and 2, we can do a patient care, up to 4 patients in the hospital entryway until they can accept those patients inside the hospital. I want to also talk about that this is low acuity patients. In other words, these are not patients that are stroke, cardiac arrest, any of those ALS or medic transported patients. These are low acuity patients that still need to be seen, but at the same time are not urgent and do not need to get into the emergency department immediately. So what we found and some of the data we've collected so far is our time frame appears to be 9 in the morning to 9 in the evening for the transport situation, but also our volume that hits the emergency department when we start getting backed up at the emergency department occurs, if it's going to occur, from 2 to 6 in the afternoon. So that's the emergency department backlog is 2 to 6, that 4-hour time frame where we stack up transport units waiting to transfer their patients. But then the overall transport issue is 9 to 9 during the day. I will also tell you that we've had an 11.4% increase in EMS 911 calls requiring transport from last year to this year. And I will tell you that, as you've probably already been briefed, and I've heard the public health briefings, the hospitals are full, and that's what's driving a lot of this. And so I will say that we started this with Medic 1 administrative personnel to start staffing this resources initially, with trying to bring on other resources. And I will tell you, on August 20th, for the first time, we actually had the first units going out without any Medic 1 administrative personnel on board, which is great because that's what our goal was. We are going to reevaluate on September 10th, but I will tell you also that this is the current situation. One of the challenges that we've been hit with is we're addressing the current situation, and the future keeps hitting us with new challenges. I will tell you that the governor's vaccine mandate, as an example, that has to happen by October 18th. That is a challenge. We are working with the fire agencies today and the private ambulance companies on how we're going to address that. But I don't even have solutions ready to go yet, so I don't know what the future holds. So my concern is, while we're doing this today, we have future requirements that are coming at us full speed. And every time I look at the light at the end of the tunnel, it is a train, and it's not anything else but a train. So that's what COVID is doing to us. But Commissioner Metzer, I think last week you had a question about the cost and how we are resourcing this. We are using reserve medic units, so they're fully equipped already. They're not staffed, and that's why we're bringing in the staffing. But the units that we're transporting with are the reserve medic units, which are fully equipped and already have the necessary equipment and supplies in them. We just have to be able to replace those supplies as we utilize them.
Commissioner Edwards' hand, I see.
My concern is that apparently it's the hospital is where the backup really is. And then they're requiring that we stay with the patient until they can see the patient. Is that kind of it in a nutshell?
That piece of it, that is it in a nutshell, that the hospital's backed up and they cannot see the patient. Department of Health requirements are that you must maintain medical care for that patient once you receive that patient. If the hospital is unable to take the patient, then we have to maintain that medical care for that patient. And so that's where that 4-hour block of time that we've determined, where we take 2 EMTs and they start caring for those up to 4 patients, that releases those 4 transport units to go back out into the field. That's one piece of it. The other piece is the shortage of transport units already in the field. So that's the other piece of it. And that's where that HPU unit comes on board and provides additional transport. And I would say that we get an average of 3 dispatches for the HPU units that are in the field, that 9 to 9 timeframe. We get an average of 3 a day for when we're able to staff those.
Okay, I guess as a follow-up to that, I don't know if this would be feasible or not, but as this problem, I don't know, becomes more exaggerated, I guess, because it seems like it's bound to, would we satisfy that requirement? My concern is that we're tying up the transport unit and can't get that back out. So could we leave someone else there so the transport unit can always get back out? I mean, do we have somebody there waiting that can always take care of that patient in the hallway on a gurney, and we can get the unit out rolling again? That's my concern.
Right, and we are when we have the available resources to staff that, we do. Typically, it's that 4-hour time frame. So what we do is we have a tracking mechanism that's been put in place, and what it does, it tracks waiting units at the emergency department. So when we see more than one ambulance tied up, we start looking to activate that, we call the entryway, where we have EMTs with the 4 patients, up to 4 patients they can care for, and release those transport units back out into the field. We are tracking that. We have a system in place, it's electronic, and it's being tracked here at Medic One, at the private ambulance companies. We've released it out to the fire agencies as well. So we have an idea and a snapshot of what it looks like at any given time.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Mejia.
No questions.
So my issue was just that, you're the emergency director, services director, and Ramiro had said that your initial request, staff had more than doubled it to 150, and then Commissioner Edwards was just really concerned and proposed doubling it again. So I understand it's a big problem. It just felt like we were pulling numbers out of thin air, and I really needed to hear from you what the resources, that we weren't just, that there was some logic behind the number, not just, well, this is a problem, let's just, allocate more money to it without knowing. Because when I asked, well, what's the real problem? It sounded like something that $150,000 wasn't going to solve it and $300,000 wasn't going to solve it. I mean, it came down to like what's going on at the hospital. So I'm happy to allocate what's needed. I just needed to hear from you, that 150 wasn't going to cut it based on what you guys are experiencing.
Right. And what's going on at the hospital, and you've seen media reports on this as well, I'm sure, that the hospital is converting training rooms, conference rooms, they're converting that to patient space. And they're just awaiting Department of Health approval for those spaces to have patients in them, which I'm hoping is a fairly quick turnaround. So the hospital is working to address capacity as well. My concern is that, like I mentioned earlier, we're looking at the problem today, but I see so much coming at us right now that I'm concerned that we have the resources necessary to address the future issues over the next 4 months. And I think that's what this is designed to do. The other piece is that we don't spend anything out of ARP. We don't spend a dime without going to Robin and Ramiro and saying, this is what's taking place. And then we're getting approval for that essentially before we actually commit funds, because we want to make sure, one, it's all eligible. We don't want to have something come back a couple of years from now that says this was an ineligible use of the funds, but also so they're aware of what's taking place at the same time.
Okay. Okay, so any other questions here? What's next, Ramiro?
So I will ask for the board to consider moving the website 500,000 and the 300,000 for the emergency services as Kurt stated to the approved column on the table they have in front of you.
I'm good with that. I hate to say that, but I am.
Okay.
Commissioner Mejia?
A thumbs up for me.
Okay. All right, then you got, it sounds like 3 thumbs.
Yeah, so the rest of the stuff on the under consideration, we already touched base at a high level last Thursday. We had a great conversation, I believe, on this past Thursday, where there's gonna be more conversation related to those allocations that is coming to the board. But at least presenting this plan to the Department of Commerce is a good plan. Is really, if you have the time to read it, this is a fantastic plan. So kudos to you, Robin. Well done. If you can touch base as to the next step, you briefly touch base on the public engagement. Maybe you can elaborate on that as well.
Sure. The plan will be submitted this afternoon to U.S. Treasury once I've filled in the last few project inventories. And then the next step is it also needs to be posted today to our website. And we need to be receiving public comment on the plan. So we'll be posting it, and I'm working with Whitney, and we'll be touching base with Megan on launching a community survey to get feedback on the plan. And we hope to have that up in 2 to 3 weeks. So that's the next step. And then we will update the plan probably at the 6-month mark. And then it's due again to U.S. Treasury next year on July 31st.
Okay, thank you, Robin.
More to come.
Thank you.
A lot more to come.
All right, let's get to item 7. It's a closed session. Are we going to be plowing ahead with these 2 sessions, Ramiro?
Yeah, about my expectation, commissioners, the closed session and the executive session will not take more than 10 minutes each. So.
Are we going to have to go into close, come back out, go in, back into
No,
executive?
if you could please announce the closed session as well as the executive session, 10 minutes each, and then we'll come back after you finish with the 2 of them.
Okay. Okay, so then the board will be moving into a closed session first pursuant to RCW 423144A regarding collective bargaining sessions. That portion of a meeting during which the governing body is planning or adopting a strategy or position to be taken by the governing body during the course of any collective bargaining, specifically a classification appeal, commissioner's action may follow. That will immediately be followed by an executive session pursuant to RCW 42301101I to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency matters relating to agency enforcement actions, or discuss with legal counsel representing the agency litigation or potential litigation. Specifically there, we're talking about Howd, Thurston County v. Pisha. And again, commissioner's action may follow. We estimate 10 minutes per item. It is now 12:11, so at 12:31, we will hopefully be back to either take action or adjourn the meeting. So with that, we'll go into closed session.
Thank you, sir. Let me announce that.